Let's talk about writing by choice. Player choice, specifically. It's summer here in Boston. Pardon the background noise. So, a player rocks up to a pair of doors. Do they choose the door on the left, or do they choose the door on the right? Can we make this choice interesting? Yes, we can. The player wants to save the princess, but it turns out that if they do that, the planet will explode. Oh no! Do they save the princess, or do they save the planet? Can we make that an interesting choice? Of course we can. Writing interesting choices is incredibly important for visual novels specifically because it's often the only kind of gameplay in the game, so you have to get it right. Let's talk about it. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to free our minds. None of our choices will have any consequences at all. Now, this is obviously a lie. Your choices are going to have consequences in the game, but we don't want to write them such that the consequences are the reason they exist. We don't want to write them such that the consequences are what make them interesting. That's almost never the right choice for a character-driven game. So, in our mind, we're going to sort of pretend like every choice has no consequences at all. How do we write these choices such that even though they have no consequences, they're still interesting and fun and fascinating? Obviously, they will have consequences. Some of these choices will fail or partially fail you and require you to try again. Some will give you more of one kind of point and less of another kind of point. Some will turn on some arc of the game, like a romance with so-and-so. And of course, some will branch because you love wasting money. So you now have two versions of your universe that you have to keep track of at all times. But in our mind, when we're writing them, we're not writing them with the consequences being the thing that drive them. Instead, what drives them is the character. We are writing character-driven stories. So we need our characters to drive our choices, and in turn, the choices also drive the characters. Here's an example. That two doors thing was not just a random example at all. It was from Stanley Parable. It's the first choice in the game. Do you choose the left door or do you choose the right door? Of course, the shtick here is that as you're walking towards the door, the narrator is telling you what Stanley, you, are doing. And they say, as Stanley went down the hallway, he took the door to the left. And at this point, you are allowed to decide whether you go left or right. And it's very obvious that what you're choosing is not a door. It's how you want your relationship with the narrator to be. Are you going to be confrontational and refuse to do what the narrator says, or are you going to go along with the narrator's story? That's the choice. It's not about doors. The doors are just the way that you make the choice. And this game continues in that vein for quite a bit. Now, of course, Stanley Parable branches. It's extremely expensive to branch like that. So you might not want to branch in quite that way. But the core of this is still there. We are seeing character-driven choices. We are deciding whether or not we're going to go along with the character story or rebel and delve into their confrontational side. We are making a choice based on how we want these characters to be, how we want them to relate to each other. Character-driven choices are very powerful, but only if the characters have something they want. They need to have what I call an active trait, a trait that makes them do things. In Stanley Parable, the active trait of the narrator is that he's trying to tell the story and you keep getting in his way. But there are plenty of other options. For example, this is Majima. He's famous from Yakuza everything as a strange, clown character. He wears tiger stripes and ambushes the main character from, sewer grates and trash cans, calling him Kiryu-chan, and he wields knives. So he's the comic relief with knives. But in Yakuza 0, that hasn't happened yet. In Yakuza 0, he's just a young thug, and he desperately wants to be in the Yakuza as just an ordinary Yakuza thug. But they found out that he's really, really good at making money as a nightclub owner. So he has to be a nightclub owner, and they won't let him stop. So he wants to be out on the street shaking people down and beating people up, and they won't let him. This character has things that are driving him. He wants to do certain things, but he's being forced to do other things. These are active traits, and they drive almost everything in the game, including our choices. When Kiryu gets choices, the player is usually given several choices that are bitter, aggressive, violent, standard Yakuza-style choices, the kind of things that a young thug might say, especially one that's been under someone's thumb for a while. But those are almost never the right choice. The right choice is almost always the one where he behaves like a clown. These choices make it very clear what he wants, and they also make it very clear that he's not allowed to want those things. He's not allowed to do those things. Something is forcing him to be a clown instead. It's all character-driven. He's a character that wants things and is forced to do things, and those come out in his choices. Even if we don't choose the choices that fail and make us start over, we see them, like lingering thoughts in the back of our mind. And we understand that that's what he actually wants to do. Even if we never choose them at all, we understand that those are the things that he wants. Those are how he really is. But something is forcing him to be a clown. And that builds tension, and later on we reveal, he's under someone's thumb, he's being forced to do this, and so on and so forth. It's a wonderful way to build it up. And what I especially like about Majima specifically is that he has the same basic characteristics as an edgy middle schooler's OC, right? You get all those middle schooler OCs who are like, oh, he's so edgy and grim and, And if you wrote, just choices based on what they want, you're going to get choices that are constantly saying no. They're constantly stopping things. He refuses to go along with someone. He rejects someone. He runs off. He, beats someone up for no reason, whatever, right? Those are almost always options that slow the game down and refuse to move forward. They're not very useful. They're not active traits. They're denial traits. They actively slow everything down. Majima has all those traits, but he is not allowed to use them. They are the bad choices that reset the minigame, the side quest. Instead, he's being forced to make the clown choice, which is a lot more fun to go through, and it's a much more active trait. It moves things forward. It's more fun to watch. It's brilliant. So even if you have a character that is, edgier than Edge, I am the darkest of night, I'm Dementia, Darkness, Dravenway, whatever her name is, right? Even if you have those characters, you want to give them traits that push them forward, that make them do stuff, because that's how you get stuff done. And we can reflect that in choices. We can have a choice where the only consequence is if you choose the wrong one too many times, you have to start over. But the point is that the wrong ones are what the character wants, and the right one is what the character doesn't want, but is being forced to do by some outside, pressure. That leads to character growth, it leads to tension, it leads to revealing why they have to do that. It's such a brilliant way to go about things. This is a character-driven choice, and it's entirely contained within Kiryu, or within Majima. Majima doesn't have any sort of relationship with the random side quest characters that goes any longer than a minute, right? So he's not really establishing that he wants to be in a specific relationship with these characters or anything like that. But instead what we're doing is we're refining what's going on with him himself. What is his relationship with his long-term situation? He's being forced to be a clown, and we keep nailing that in, and we learn more and more about it. This is something that allows an enormous amount of nuance, because you can control when these other options start to fade away, what they're being replaced with. What happens when this pressure just vanishes and that option is no longer on the table? Which of the much more brutal options are you going to go with? Fascinating, isn't it? That's what writing by choice really means. When you get to look at a character who's got different active traits and their relationship to the world around them and their own arc and all the characters around them, even if the choice doesn't do anything, even if the choice has no consequences, by driving the choice with the characters, with what they want, we can get an enormous amount done. Caveat, you have to have characters that want stuff. They have to have active traits. They have to have traits that move the story forward, that make them do things. If all of your characters are passive, then this won't accomplish anything. You won't have choices that can be character driven. And that's when you start to get choices like, oh, do you want to save the princess or do you want to save the world? that shouldn't really be a choice, except at the very, very end of the game. Like, that can be the last choice. But that shouldn't be a choice earlier on, because it's not character-driven. We don't really have... The choice is too big to be character-driven, because anyone can argue either way for any sort of character, right? So what you do is your choices have to really reflect who your characters are and what they want and how that is driving them through your story. And that's it. Short and sweet. And it's too hot to continue, so this is what you get. I hope it was fine. See ya.